Hi, I'm Sarah for Sarah in Tech, and today we're going to be interviewing Jake Overall.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
What's your official title?
So I guess official title, I am the CEO and founder of CodeWorks.
And what does CodeWorks do exactly?
So CodeWorks is what's traditionally called a coding bootcamp, right? And so a coding bootcamp is we take individuals who are career seeking and try to get them career ready in a very short time period. So we have people who are trying to cross train come to us and say, I want to become a software developer. And so we put them through a 13-week long intensive course, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 type thing, right?
Wow.
It's pretty crazy. And then they come out at the end with a software job is the goal. And, we've been doing that for the last 6 years. So really, really fun.
What sort of languages do you guys cover for the software engineering?
So primarily we cover what we call, quote unquote, the full stack, right? So it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript kind of on the client side. And then we do C# with the .NET framework on the back end.
Those are not languages I know, so there's a little bit of Greek to me.
No, for sure. There's some crossover between like Node and Python, right? Where let's say we're building like a web application. Node is a primary JavaScript language, and Python is also one of those really popular languages. So you kind of have a little bit of crossover maybe between those two. I don't know if you're familiar with Python or not, but
I'm quite familiar with Python.
I would have guessed so.
I think I would get in trouble if I wasn't.
Yeah, I would imagine so with being a data scientist. So,
So you founded this company.
Yep.
And it's going pretty well. But when did you discover you were interested in technology? Do you remember that aha moment?
So tech just kind of in general, right? Like I was always the nerdy kid in school, right? Just kind of growing up, love playing video games, love building my own computers, things of that nature. But I decided that I would actually go into the healthcare industry professionally first, right? And I was graduating high school right around the, .com bust and, the whole computer people are a dime a dozen, right? And everything's being offshored. And with HP and Micron being here local, like we were seeing that in our local economy. So rather than kind of follow my passion initially, right, I went into healthcare and I actually got my degree in nursing. And because I was good with computers, that also just so happened to kind of coincide with a big push to say everything healthcare needs to be electronic by X date, right? X year. And so being naturally good with computers, I kind of got promotions and got put into training roles and training nurses on how to use different EHRs and things of that nature. So
electronic medical records.
Yep.
And filling them in for patients and all that.
Yeah. And so kind of with that transition, right, I moved into this role of having to teach people tech, right, teach people, and some at the point in time, some of those nurses were definitely non-technical people. And, it was try to solve a problem and start writing programs to solve those problems, right? And so kind of fell back into that role of, being a software developer, being a tech educator. And I finally was like, all right, I'm done with healthcare anyways. I haven't been doing it for years. And, I've mostly been management and whatnot. And then, I decided to jump back over into the tech industry.
So what is your favorite part about teaching something new to someone?
I think like you were saying, that aha moment, right? I find it just, exhilarating when you're teaching students and they finally get something to work for the first time. And it's, the double pump, hands in the air, yes moments, right? Got it working, right? As a teacher, you love to sit back and see those things. And I think it's because those little successes lead to the much larger successes, right? And in the process of teaching people, helping them truly change their lives, that's one of our mission statements is helping these individuals develop their future. What we really push for is that retraining, right? And so we have a lot of people who come to us and, maybe they were a still worker, right? And so one of our students in the past, he was a still worker. He was working on big high rise, got injured on the job and nearly killed. And his wife was like, you've got to find a different career. This doesn't work for you, right? he came through our program, did very well, but, didn't know anything about computer programming beforehand, and ended up leaving with a job that was paying within $5,000 of what he was making in the steel industry, which is a very highly paid industry as well. So, and it was just one of those things where it's like, now his biggest mistakes can be undone with Control Z, as opposed to, having thousands of pounds of steel drop on you. So,
or end up in a hospital with
Right.
medical bills and being repaired. So that's always a safer transition.
absolutely. Right. Absolutely. So,
Do you guys help with job placement as well?
yeah, definitely. So one of our employees, she's a total rock star. Her name's Brittany Owensman. She was been voted as one of the top 100 recruiters in the nation. And we're fortunate enough that she actually works with us at CodeWorks, and she's just phenomenal with helping students get their resumes ready. She's a certified resume writer and things of that nature too. And so that's all part of the CodeWorks service. And then we help with placement and, networking and all of that stuff. So yeah, Brittany's just amazing at it though. So I can't take credit for that. She definitely, when I initially hired her, I was like, this is what we want. Here's a vague concept of how I think we could get there. And she's like, now let me show you how to actually get there. And she's just taken off with it and done awesome. So
Sounds like a real go-getter.
yeah, she's great.
Do you offer classes outside of the Boise area?
We don't. So we do have some remote learning, of course, for sure, right? But primarily we are a face-to-face on-campus instruction. You're showing up Monday morning, 9 a.m., you go home every day at 5, and then you're back the next day.
So I know, because I only do my podcasts in real life, that doing things remotely via Zoom, there's just something like the charisma and everything you just miss.
Yeah, and it's one of those things like last year in the midst of COVID, right? Like we had to close, we had to push everyone to remote learning. And I've always been a big proponent of, face-to-face education will 100% beat remote online learning, right? And I think there's a lot of camaraderie that comes when you get a bunch of students all in the classroom together, all in one space, trying to learn one concept, right? There's just something about that works and works incredibly well, right? And so we definitely like to capitalize on that. And, whenever we can, we definitely like to have the in-person training.
What is something that keeps you motivated?
That's an interesting question because I think it has changed over the years. When I very first started the company 6 years ago, it was, I hope we can just keep our doors open, right? Let's see if we can, help people, train them. And originally when my brother and I started the company, it was, if we're going to train these people, well, quite frankly, we need the talent, right? We are training them to hire them for ourselves anyways. And so it was train them, teach them what they need to know, and get them a job, and quite frankly, have them kind of work for us or, for our friends and other employers in the Valley who we were friends with, right? And so that was like that initial push. And then over the years, just as things have grown and changed and, do like they do, those motivations and those initial like fears, I guess, of, hey, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this just to survive. Now it's, okay, here's what we could do to better the experience for the students. Here's what we could do to make sure that our outcomes are improving. Here's what we can do to make sure that the people that are coming to us that, quite frankly, for the most part, we have those students who have said, look, I'm, $40,000 in debt to college. I chose a career that I can't find a job for, right? I studied XYZ, or we've even had those people who it's like, I have a computer science degree, but I don't know enough about programming to actually get hired.
That seems insane to me. Like, how could you have a computer science degree but not know how to program? I don't have one, but somehow I know how to program.
Right.
So.
And I think there's that nuance, I think, and it depends on the different universities. Fortunately, Boise State's very good, but there's other universities that, computer science has grown into such an enormous field that sometimes you get too much generalized knowledge and nothing specific enough to actually be an effective employee for a while, right? Especially if you say, well, I have a CS degree and I've learned a whole bunch about theories and algorithms and whatnot, but I don't know any programming languages. Okay, well, now you're going to struggle to find that job as a software developer, right? Especially a software developer who companies right now, it's, we need a React developer. We need a web application developer. It's a completely different skill set. And it's almost like in the healthcare industry when you have your pre-med, right, which you go to school for. And then if you actually want to be a specific type of doctor, you then actually study under that specific field, right? Mm-hmm. And I almost kind of think that computer science has started to go that way as well, where there's just such a diversity in what you can do, right? Like as a data scientist, right? Like you use Python, right? You're crunching big data sets, but you're probably not building applications. And I could be wrong there, but that's just kind of one of those things there's differences in the problems that need solved.
I mean, I've definitely gotten thrown into the deep end of here's the database.
Yeah.
Can you make us a pretty GUI and the model and, query the database and make a pipeline? And so I've been like, here you go. Let us know when you're done. And I'm like, I will.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that little learn as you go type of thing. So.
But I know one place I worked, they actually wouldn't hire people with CS degrees because they were so notorious for not knowing how to actually program. And they had someone without even a bachelor's degree, just like writing these giant programs and doing everything very well. And they definitely knew how to program. And I was always kind of struck by that. So I have definitely seen it in action, what you're talking about having a CS degree and not actually knowing how to program, which is
right.
So
and that's, I go back to that. I'm not knocking a CS degree, right? Like in traditional colleges, great. But there's a difference between, and what I largely consider, these coding boot camps, because it's not like it was an initial, like my idea, it came out of nowhere, right? Coding boot camps have been very successful, but they've followed essentially the technical training model, right? Like, and quite frankly, programming, software development is a technical skill. And so we can train it in a technical format as opposed to training it in a more traditional classroom approach, like a university would, so to speak. So,
I mean, I've been a mentor at a boot camp, so I kind of know the flow and how it goes, and that I've also lectured, and I've obviously been part of the system. And I'm not knocking CS degrees either. I actually didn't enter data science through a CS degree, but I entered it through a stats degree. I do know a lot of people who are very good that have PhDs in computer science that do data science very well. So I'm not saying it's a blanket statement. I just want to make sure.
Of course. And I always like to clarify that, especially being the owner of one of these coding boot camps, sometimes there are, the articles published where it's like, oh, boot camps are better than CS degrees. No, they're just different, right? It's just a difference in the application of the education, really.
Well, usually like a bachelor's degree goes through all of the theory and everything, whereas your end goal is to produce someone who has that skill.
Yep. And
you might skip over some of the theory and they
Absolutely.
might miss it because there definitely is 4 years of knowledge that happened during a bachelor's degree. I mean, I have a liberal arts degree. Let me tell you, I definitely use that like sociology stuff that I learned every day.
Right. And that's absolutely the case,
But I mean, it does make you a well-rounded person. So anyway.
Yeah.
But let's not talk about that because it's obviously a contentious issue. Do you have any life advice that you would like to share that you think spans the test of time?
That's an interesting. I don't think I've ever been asked that question like so specifically. Life advice, it's cliche and whatnot, but it's, if you actually enjoy what you're doing, right? Work is still work. It's always going to be work. But if you actually enjoy it, like I talk to my students a lot about, there's the concepts of the Monday blues, right? Or I'm sorry, the Sunday blues, right? Like it's Sunday, I have to go back to work tomorrow. It's just terrible, right? And you're dreading the next day because it's time to go back to work. And I think that's a good indicator that you're probably doing something that you're not passionate about. Because it's one of those things where I can't say like, I love leaving my family to go to work. No, of course I'd rather spend time with my family, but I don't dread going back to work every week, right? I don't dread getting up the next morning and saying, sweet, it's time to go to work, right? Like, and so many people have that feeling, and it's, if that's you, I highly recommend, you find something else to do, right? And really truthfully, like, life's too short to be miserable. So, we end up working about a third of our life away, I think is what it is. And so you might as well enjoy what you're doing during those hours.
That is good life advice. Love the work you do and love your life.
Absolutely.
Where do you see tech or boot camps in general maybe going within the next 5 years? Do you see them becoming a bigger part of the college? I know one of the boot camps I've talked with, they were actually brought in by the colleges to come in and train kids after they've been through the bachelor's program.
Yeah.
I mean, where do you see it going?
So we at CodeWorks, we've had a couple of those different initiatives with different universities, some of the different colleges. CSI is one of them we kind of have a loose partnership with. Like I said, we're more that technical training, right? There's been plenty of boot camps that were acquired by big universities, and they still run as a boot camp, and it's just a different arm of that university, right? And so I don't think we're going to see boot camps go away anytime soon. The need for software developers is too great for us to see a decline or a reason for the boot camp philosophy or the technical training to go down.
Especially in this valley, we are lacking a lot of technical skills. We need a lot more developers around here.
Absolutely, we do. And it's one of those things, Ryan DeLuca, who's local business owner, he's the one who started bodybuilding.com, like back in the Amazon day, like early startup of Amazon time as well, right?
I think his website was like one of the first websites to sell a product on the internet.
Yeah, I believe that's true, right?
So it's pre-Amazon, pre-eBay, if you kids can imagine that day. Back when Netflix used to send DVDs to us.
Yeah, you got them in the mail, right?
And Blockbuster was actually a thing with VHSs.
Yeah, it was great. But no, it's funny because I remember this. He gave a talk, and this, probably at least 10 years ago at Boise Code Camp, and his topic was software is consuming the world, right? And it was like 10 to 12 years ago. I swear it was. And, I've only seen that need and that drive for everyone and their dog needs a website these days, right? Everyone has to have, a online or some sort of mobile app or something of that nature. And behind every little piece of, device that you have in your hand, there's thousands of applications. Well, it takes software developers to write them, right? So I don't see that going down anytime soon.
If anything, I would say it's increasing between the augmented reality, the machine melding with your head with the Neuralink,
absolutely,
the self-driving cars. Our cars are becoming more computer than actual mechanics at this point. So I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah. I think it's also one of those things to, kind of bear in mind. And I don't remember who said this, but Jay Larson, I was on a similar podcast with him, and he talked about what is the literacy of the new age, right? And it really truthfully is computer knowledge, right? Like if you think about the people 10, 15 years ago, those nurses that I was training to essentially use electronic charting, right? 15 years ago, it was, hey, I'm going to retire, as opposed to having to learn something new, right? I don't want to use the computer. And nowadays it's, well, you don't have a choice, right? Like if you don't know how to check your email, like you are long outside of the work industry.
You can't even apply for a job, even something as simple as like McDonald's.
Yeah.
You need to be able to use a computer to apply to work at McDonald's, which I remember having a paper resume for my first job and handing it. Right.
And yeah, it's just one of those things like, time marches forward. And as we're going through it, some of these changes, they just seem natural and they don't seem out of the norm. But when you compare it to how that worked even just 5 years ago, it's drastically different, right? And so, yeah, that need for, technical people is only skyrocketing.
And I definitely see, even when I worked at a big medical facility, they didn't have Hadoop. Hadoop was like a new thing
Yep.
at the beginning of my career. And now Hadoop's an old thing almost, that style of big database. And now we have different tools like Snowflake and GCP and AWS, and cloud is a thing. And that wasn't a thing when I started.
No, of course not, right? And that's one of those things too, I think is a testament to, I don't really care where you went to school, because regardless of who taught you, what university it was or what technical school it was, or, whether it's a coding boot camp, if you haven't stayed up to date with what's new, in the course of 5 to 10 years, you're going to be outskilled anyways, right? And that's just a testament to how quickly the industry is continuing to change, right?
And I cheat because I'm not very good about reading the latest papers for everything for data science. So I made a data science meetup, and I get a bunch of people who like data science to come hang out, and I present at it pretty regularly too. But when you get a bunch of people and give them some beer and you tell them to talk about data science, you hear about the transformers, about the FFTs and everything. And to me, that's a hack, because I like interacting with people more than I like reading papers.
Yeah, I've never considered it to be a hack, but you're not wrong. We host a Boise software developer group. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I'm one of the organizers of that as well. And yeah, it's, you throw pizza at people, once a month, and you have someone come and present. And, I think community is definitely one of those things where if you want to appear to be intelligent, right? Well, you just know a lot of people who actually are intelligent, and then you kind of, hey, let me go buy you lunch today, and I need to know about XYZ, right? And then, yeah, you step into that meeting and you get to speak as if you actually know it, right? So yeah, probably that is kind of hacky, but it works, and it works incredibly well. And having those resources, having that community to lean on is absolutely part of what makes, I think, civilization, right? Us as humans as a whole, like something that we can even do. So
I hear that like a human in general is the sum of the 5 closest people to them. Or you're obviously the sum of all the people that you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
But it definitely is like an entryway for me when one of my friends is like, I use transformers at work, here's how I do it. And then I want to go out and read the transformer papers. Mm-hmm. So, but that's just kind of my workaround, but it is important to always stay up to date.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's really funny. So.
Well, can you tell me a little bit more about your meetup group that you run?
Yeah, so Boise Software Developer Group, we meet up. It is the first Thursday of every month. We postponed it for COVID, right? We stopped meeting up. We did a couple of online meetups, but, attendance was pretty sparse. And we are actually just getting that restarted now with, the vaccinations and all the other stuff coming out. So we're real excited to get that back up and rolling. And, we take guest speakers and, kind of get them scheduled out for, I usually try to get at least a couple months in advance so I know what it is. And then we usually provide pizza and, have everyone show up and present for, 30 minutes on a particular topic, and then hang out and network and try and, get people jobs and, connect different companies and employers, and you really just have a good time, at least once a month. So
we do something similar, but it's once a quarter.
Okay.
I'm doing it because it's fun mostly.
Yeah.
But
and it's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work to host and manage and, maintain those meetups. And that's one of those things where we would not do it monthly if we didn't have such a large pool of software developers that we pull from in this valley, where it's like, hey, here's the general interest for this year, which we, pull our members of. And then it's like, does anyone want to present on any of these topics? And it usually fills up real quick. So
I might have to steal some of the ideas about pooling members.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Usually just ask people what they're interested in, and I'm like, cool, we'll go with that. Because last time it was quantum computing and reinforced learning. So both very interesting data science topics that are very complex, but don't have much practical application.
So that practical application. So we have a podcast ourselves, which we recorded 2 days ago, right? And one of our topics that we were actually discussing, and I don't know if you've seen any of this or not, but GitHub has just released Copilot, right? And so Copilot is essentially like, let's use AI, let's use machine learning, right? Let's throw those big buzzwords out there, right? And I'd be kind of curious from the data scientist standpoint, what do those words actually mean to you?
But I actually have a lecture on that.
I would imagine so, right? A lot of people use them wrong, right? But so GitHub Copilot is all about, if you comment what you want your code to do, then GitHub will scour its resources and try to build you something that actually works, right? And so then the job of the software developer is more, let me review this to see if this actually does work, rather than spend all my time trying to reinvent the wheel, right? So.
And I mean, I think if I'm correct, that's based on natural language processing and things in that space, because they have such a giant corpus of programming that they can pull from to do that. And so it's kind of very similar to like GPT-3 in that space. And that, are you familiar with GPT-3?
I'm not familiar with GPT-3, I think is what you said. Yeah. I do know that, yes, there's the natural learning. It's reading the comments and then trying to decipher your intent, and then taking that intent and comparing it against, public repositories. And I mean, there's billions of them, right? So, and then I believe at this current point in time, it's, hey, here's a function where someone commented, it says this is what it does. So we kind of think that's correct, but it's still in beta right now. I actually just got accepted into that beta program, so still just barely starting to play around with it right now. But no, so what is that GPT-3 thing?
So it's just I guess the way to describe it is it's a bunch of neural nets, and that are set up like, they're not set up like, they are transformers is in the way that they did it. And the most interesting part is the amount of data it was trained on, and the structure of these nets in the way that they were doing it. There are a lot of different competing things out there to GPT-3 that just change the data that it was trained on, because they won't actually release the data. Some people feel like the data it was trained on is biased, and they're trying to make less biased, and then they release it. So there's like a open source one in Hugging Face. And then they're also gating GPT-3, which makes some people upset, and they're trying to say, well, it's for the good of everyone, because if GPT-3 got out, then spam robots and stuff like that would make really good spam emails. But basically what GPT-3 does, it can almost do anything. It's kind of weird. You can feed it like a very complex publication about a topic and ask it to summarize it in, like you were a 5-year-old, in 1 or 2 sentences, and then it just plops it out there like that for you. Wow. And it does a lot of different things. It doesn't just summarize things in concise text that is easy to understand. I think me and one of my friends were playing around with it, and we gave it a quantum computing paper, and it just is a very dense topic, and it spit it out in 2 sentences, and we're like, darn, it got it like right on the nail. Yeah. And I'm like, I would have sat there really for a long time noodling how to make 2 sentences to explain it to a 5-year-old. And, it has all these complex equations and everything, and it just did it way better than I could have. And I was,
Yeah. It's the compute, the process, it's incredible, right? And talking about the biases, though, behind that, a model is only as good as what the data is that's being fed into it, right? And so, that's really interesting. I'll do some extra research on that, but it's one of those things where I first started kind of looking a little bit at the machine learning and how could I actually apply it, right? And for me, everything's a logic gate, right? We're shifting left or right type of idea based upon data sets, and this tutorial thing that I was following was all about teaching in the Unity game engine. You had a paddle and you had a ball, and the goal was to teach that if the ball falls off the paddle, then the computer's sad type of thing, right? And so it was interesting because at first it's just simply, hey, there's no external stimulus, and so the ball falls, the paddle gets turned horizontal, and it catches it, and they win, right? But then you introduce, there's wind factor, and there's all these other different types of things. And so by the end of that tutorial, you had this paddle that could maneuver around and keep a ball, up in the air, which is just super cool, right? But at the same time, it's interesting because when you have a very closed box, you say, well, we know exactly what is going to happen. We know what all the variables we are going to introduce are going to be, then I think it's pretty predictive to say, okay, yes, then I can teach a computer to do that. What I find fascinating about, true AI and machine learning is we don't know what all the variables are going to be, right? And so getting those models trained up to say, well, how do you take something that you've never seen before and use what you have seen to actually infer and say, this is, 98% likely what it is going to be, right? Like it's awesome to me, right? And I don't have nearly enough of a deep understanding of how it actually works, but I do love those concepts. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm building like web applications, right? I'm building forms, I'm building websites, I'm building things of that nature. So I don't get a ton of time to play around with too much machine learning stuff.
I've just been doing it like almost a decade. So
yeah,
I'm like, let me tell you about
love
it. Machine learning. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So do you have any closing remarks that you want to make?
I just appreciate you bringing me on. I could talk for hours, geek out on stuff like this. So,
I mean, we are allowed to geek out pretty much as long as we want, and they can edit anything out that I say. So,
yeah, I mean, well, then in that case, no, I just, again, just super appreciate and, appreciate your time. And, I do think that, to talk in here's, I guess, a question maybe as opposed to a closing remark, but a question is, you've got the big companies out there, Microsoft, IBM,
Bang.
Yeah. So you've got these big companies, and we talk about AI, we talk about machine learning, and then we talk about ethics, right?
Yes.
And I know a lot of these larger companies have ethic or committees around, is this being trained in a biased way? Is it not being trained in a biased way? Like, what are kind of your thoughts and opinions on, who's to say that the committee's unbiased, right? Like, how do we solve that problem?
I have an opinion that people don't like to hear, but it's not training or not training a model in a biased way. It's that our world is inherently biased. And when we collect data on it, we get a mirror back at ourselves, showing us that we are not biased. We are not ethical. And we don't like what we see. So we're like, we are going to train this model differently so we feel better about ourselves. But the truth is, as a community, as a culture, that we need to change because we don't like what we're seeing. And so we're just trying to throw like a sheet over the mirror. And we need to actually change, not just make a model and put a little Band-Aid over top of it. We need to see real change. And that's not something people want to hear when they have ethics committee, because I do agree that the models should be fair and balanced. But the truth is that the data is inherently biased, and the model is only as good as the data.
So I guess that opens that question to then, can we train the models to be better than society itself, right? Is that even possible for us as a society or as humans, right? To get to that point where we are training the model and it truthfully is the unbiased thing that can help guide us to those decisions, right? And not to, I don't want to get like too super political or anything here, but I mean, you have, we've got race, we've got gender, we've got all of these different things that are hot topics in the news right now. And it's,
everyone's always favorite thing to ask me is like, Sarah, what do you think about your gender? And I'm like, I think I am my gender. Like, what do you want? But
sure.
Yeah.
Right. And it's one of those things where it's like, we talk about there's echo chambers, especially with the problems of social media and whatnot. Like if I want to get online and I have an opinion and that's the way that I feel, I can find thousands, millions of people who believe the exact same thing as me. And so, yes, it just echoes it back to me that, okay, I'm not wrong. Right. And I think that's, like you said, we are very biased. Humans, we are biased, and I think it's, part of our standard culture, part of our standard learning. So who's to say how do we train these models? Right. That to me is one of those, if we talk about the singularity, right? And I don't know if that's a topic you you follow closely at all or not. And, maybe that's me just more on the nerd
what
side.
What specifically about the singularity?
So the concept of the singularity, at least in my opinion, is, we are truly going to be able to train these computers, these processes to say they're better than us, right? And I don't mean better than us that they can process faster, but that they're more emotionally complex. They understand the human emotion.
So they have an emotional IQ.
Exactly. And that's one of those things that for me,
they possess empathy.
Right.
More than a human, I would hope. Otherwise, you wouldn't want something with 1,000 IQ running around unless it possessed empathy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that empathy piece, though, is hard, because it's one of those things to say, what's truly just. You don't want justice, right? You want, you don't want harsh line 100% of the time, right? Like if a kid steals a candy bar from a store, right? He's a kid, he's learning, right? And so that's something that, I'm going to punish my 4-year-old very differently than I'm going to punish my 9-year-old for stealing candy, right? And I think some of that comes with the concepts of we understand human emotion, we understand human development, we understand how all that works. Are those things that we're going to be able to trust computers with someday? I don't know, right?
So I know statistics isn't that cool. It's like...
It is that cool.
Well, I mean, it is, but basically data science is statistics on big data. I've even taken a class on big data in statistics. Looks very oddly similar to data science, but that's beside the point. The thing that I wanted to say is that statistics has been around a very long time. Like Fisher was around, was it like the 17 or 1800s or something like that? It's been well over 200 years. They made a law in the United States that as a statistician, unless you're like actually like coming in to talk about something other than like the statistical probability. So statisticians started coming into the law system. I can't remember like what exactly kicked this off, but they started coming into the law system, and the likelihood that you committed a crime started to become part of a thing, and statisticians would calculate it. And they made a law saying statisticians cannot participate in that capacity to say the likelihood that someone's did or didn't commit. And a lot of these ethics issues that data science is running into seems like statistics kind of dabbled in it at some point and got completely thrown out.
Got thrown out.
I know that in certain situations we can't do that, especially with like face recognition. There's definitely a racial bias that existed, at least in the first few iterations of facial recognition. People with darker skin were not being recognized because it was trained on lighter skinned individuals.
Absolutely.
So these are things that we can't avoid, whereas statistics, just squarely got kicked out. So
yeah, interesting, right? So is that our own bias? Is that our mirror, right? Like that did that to us, or was that in the best interest of, because there's some movie, I don't remember what it was called, but there's a movie that's like you get put in prison for some future crime that you are going to commit someday.
RoboCop?
Right? It's one of those Hollywood movies, right? And that's where the people that pull their knowledge about AI and machine learning from Hollywood, like, please don't. But
I mean, I am always so like mildly upset when I watch a figure skating movie, because I've been figure skating since I was like 2 or 3, and I have a lot of opinions about it. And when I watch anything with like AI, I'm like, it does not work like that in that movie. Can you like have an AI consultant come on to this like script and help you write it to make it realistic?
Yeah.
But yes, sorry.
Yeah, no, I totally get it, because it's the same thing for me when it comes to like programming or cybersecurity, right? Because I do trainings in cybersecurity as well. And so, yeah, it's definitely one of those. Hollywood always gets it wrong, right? At one point in time, it's like, oh, we're hacking in, and you've got 2 people using one keyboard. Like, what? No, wait, what? 2 keyboards connected to one computer, and they're both typing. No, that's not how that works. But okay.
There's a specific command in Linux. I can't remember what it is, and it turns the screen into the Matrix.
Yep.
That's what I feel like all these movies, they're like, input command, Matrix time.
Yeah. ASCII, you haven't been Rickrolled until you've been ASCII text in the command line Rickrolled.
Oh, wow. I
it's
can't
pretty great.
I can't say I've done that.
But
or experienced that. Okay, so lightning round.
Okay.
Favorite programming language?
I hate that. I'll say JavaScript.
Okay, fine.
Uh-huh.
Favorite technology stack?
Definitely .NET framework.
Favorite time of day?
Middle of the night.
Is that when you get most of your programming done?
Absolutely. Yep.
How do you get into your flow state?
For me, it's, just like chill music, no lyrics. And usually late at night, no distractions and lights off. Like traditional programmer, like throw me in the basement, give me pizza and leave me alone. Right. That's kind of more my flow, but.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that you want to talk about or?
Just again, I had a blast. This is super fun. Appreciate you having me on the show, and hopefully not too many edits that you have to do. But
that's up to Travis. That's not up to me.
Yeah, we one of our team members. He's 19 years old, young kid, super cool guy. His name's Justin, and he does all of our audio stuff for us, and we call him Audio Boy, right? Because he's just so young. But no, it's awesome when you have those team members where it's like, we're just gonna sit here and babble, and Audio Boy will fix it. But we say it in good jest. But
so the cool thing that they do is on the cameras they have like a board, and he actively switches while we're recording. So he's real time editing.
Wow.
Yeah. And then they like go through again and clean it down into like clips and stuff like that. They're amazing.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's way cool.
You can't have them. They're mine.
Yeah. It's a really nice setup. So.
Well, it's Speak Boise, so they're very cool and they're very awesome.
Well, great. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming on Sarah in Tech. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Sarah in Tech. Feel free to email me at sarah@sarahintech.net or follow me on Instagram at sarahintech. Hope you enjoyed listening.